Hi, Lindsay. I'm excited to talk to you today about some of the work that you and I are doing. I like to call it practical neuroscience. And welcome.
Hi, Patty. Great to be here with you.
So I would love to share with whoever's listening and learn from you some of the ways that you work with clients to help them with their thoughts. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your understanding of neuroscience and why our thoughts are so important.
Why are thoughts so important? Yeah, I think it's how we've survived as a species, and now, for people as privileged as us who get to have these lovely conversations on Zoom, that survival mode actually works against us. Is like there's a negativity bias in the brain that was originally designed by nature to protect us and keep us safe so that our species could evolve and continue, right? So the negativity bias in the brain basically means that every experience that we have, all of the negative features will be stored in our memory. Much more. We can access the positive aspects of these memories, but it takes a lot more effort and they don't come up spontaneously unless we swim upstream to nature, right? And do the effort and have the discipline so that spontaneous recollections of happy experiences can emerge, right? And so you have to retrain the brain, by doing daily practices, by doing specific, there's a lot of, research backed, journaling exercises, things of this nature to get into the mindset that snaps you out of the negativity bias in the brain.
And I mean, I'm seeing so many people in the world right now that are suffering. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. And so, for most of us, if what you're saying is that bias is keeping us in a negative thought loop, it's keeping us in fear, then what I'm hearing you also say is that we can get out of that loop by using some of the positive psychology tools, going into nature and re-establishing a different harmony within our body to reject that fear. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah, it's creating a lifestyle that so we don't get stuck, right? In that fear that, like we've talked about before, that addiction to adrenaline and cortisol, and we live in a sad world, and we live in a lot of people live in a fearful state because of everything that's on the news, and that's real, and so we have to take care of ourselves even more today than we ever have before because now we're all at risk for burnout. Even if you're not a CEO of a company or whatever, we're all at risk for burnout. We're all at risk for nervous system damage because we all have limiting beliefs from our childhood. We all have macro or micro traumas in our unconscious mind, and that's where that inner critic of that fear comes online, that negativity bias, and then it's looking for ways to reinforce itself. That's how the negativity bias works, is it's a pattern matching algorithm, right? So when we get on our social media or when we look at the news or just have conversations about what's going on in the world, that negativity bias and those stories of the inner critic are constantly being reinforced. So there's no real getting away from it, but we can balance it out, like you said, by getting in nature, by doing these mindset practices, to maintain somewhat of a positive mindset in today's world, right?
Well, I'm being aware of it. And what I love about our conversations and looking for those practical ways, and we've mentioned a few, and I know that when I talk to groups and teams, journaling is absolutely one of them to become aware of that inner voice. And, who is the inner voice? For me, I've often called her Helga because Helga is the one that tells me I can't do something or I'm too tired or somebody was undermining me, right? This negative voice within me, but I also have this positive voice within me that knows the science and knows that it doesn't serve me to be in that negative state. It doesn't serve me to be in judgment. It doesn't serve me to be in fear or lack or in a place where I'm complaining about literally anything. And the practical side of the neuroscience is understanding that there is a path out from that negativity when we create a life that's patterned towards positivity and positive interactions in life. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking of all the beautiful things in my house. I try not to have a cluttered house, but that when I walk through my house, it triggers memories of beautiful people or beautiful scenes that calm my nervous system, is just creating this environment that lifts me up and supports me and reminds me of the positive elements of my life. I remember I'll share a story that I've shared before. But I had a friend quite a few years ago, back when I was in college, actually. And there was a track meet that he was supposed to win his particular event. And it was going to allow, Stanford to win the big game, the big track meet against Berkeley. And he lost. And for a year after that, he chose to drink out of a Cal Berkeley cup to
Mm.
remind himself that he failed. And I never understood it, but I never understood the neuroscience back then. And to realize that there are people in the world who choose to allow themselves to suffer, to remind themselves every day for a year about something they failed at. I knew at the time there was no good that could come of that. And it's only now understanding the neuroscience that his energy would have plummeted at every time he saw that cup because it was a reminder of failure. I choose to fill my home with those things that lift me up, to remind me of people in my life who support my journey and that things that'll keep me in a positive way. So if a cluttered mess is in my house, my goal is to not walk by it more than 2 times before I do something about it because it's taking my energy and my focus away from my best life and distracting me as I walk through my house. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
think I loved what you said about, or what you're saying about your environment and how to just spontaneously be in these more optimal mindsets, And what I really love about your house, which is also a retreat center, is that it naturally puts you in this mindset of awe, right? Like all of those, I've never seen so many hummingbirds, and what that the neuroscience of that, of awe, right, is that it gets you out of your prefrontal cortex. It gives you an option to be out of the self-referential thinking. And the problem with the self-referential thinking is that it does this thing where it categorizes into a polarity or a duality of like, dislike, good, bad, right, wrong, these preferences, like all of these dualities, right, and polarities. It does this categorization thing in the prefrontal cortex, right? And when we get into awe, of noticing something beautiful, especially that view of those mountains overlooking Santa Cruz, right? It gives you our brain an option for a pathway to be in parallel processing, right? To appreciate that beauty, right? And so if you're doing that more, but the neuroscience also tells us that if you get into that parallel processing, which is what happens when people are in flow, which is what happens when people are in advanced states of meditation, which is what happens when people use psychedelics, right? They get into parallel processing. And the more that you access that network of the brain spontaneously on a regular basis, the more and more it'll happen, and the more and more choice you have to be there with no effort, right?
Mhm. I love that. And that's been my experience. I used to have just these brief minutes of awe when but this was probably 10 years ago when I'd first start feeling it. I'd be driving over the hill going into work at Stanford and at about the same place, coming over that hill and seeing Lexington and the sun shining over Lexington, I would have this overwhelming just awe of the sunrise and the just beauty of the mountains. And for a long time, I thought it was that I was in this beautiful relationship with this man that's now my husband. And so I'd call him up and I'd be like, oh, I just had this overwhelming feeling of love. And it must be you. And I'm sure it was partially. But as I've gotten more in tune with nature and more in tune with myself at my best, I realize it is that awe. It is that moment where I choose to let go of my personal ego needs and focus on something so beautiful outside myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I do with my clients is like, in an iterative process, helping them train the brain, their primary mode of perception to see every experience as an opportunity for awe. And when there's some sort of hardship, when there's some sort of adversity, when things go sideways in their company or whatever, it's like, okay, what can I learn here? What is the beautiful opportunity that I have here? And I'm sure a lot of people listening might think that that's extreme or idealistic, but through an iterative process, that mode of being in awe on a regular basis, even in the mundane, ordinary, or even in adversity, is actually possible. And that's when we have completely reprogrammed our nervous system. And it's possible. And it's not as idealistic as it might seem.
I absolutely believe it's possible. And I now live in that state a good part of my days. And when I don't, it's usually due to overstimulation, not enough sleep, I
Yeah.
maybe too much sugar. And all of those things really take away that sense of awe and flow. And I love that you and I both talk about flow because I do believe that as human beings, we are the most advanced creatures on earth. And this earth, I believe, is meant for us to find joy in, to live in harmony with nature, and to absolutely love the life that we have here. And I do believe it's possible when we rewire, when we find the good in our lives, when we understand the science that shows us that being negative, judgmental of ourselves and others, of having that polarity of good and bad, robs us of what is. And I am so excited that you and I are going to have more conversations because I love that you and I have come from such different backgrounds. Yes, I went to Stanford. Yes, I helped with some research in different ways, but the joy that I've found in the last 5 years being in nature has brought me to the same conclusions and reading lots of good books and great, great things. But it brought me and you to such similar beautiful places that now we can invite others to join us. So I'm looking forward to those conversations, many more to come, where we can learn more about practical neuroscience and how to build our most beautiful life.
Yeah. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.